like to thank the Director General, Dr. Mani, for receiving us here, myself and Secretary Blinken, U.S. Secretary of State. First, I would like to show my really excitement and delight with the visit of the Secretary of State to Africa, of course, but in particular to Abidjan, and more specifically to visit with me at the African Development Bank, and in particular to talk about one of our agencies that we support, which is the Africa Rise, to see the work that we are trying to do in terms of food security for Africa. The Secretary of State and I share the same thing. He eats rice. I can eat rice 5 times a day. He says he can eat rice, the same thing. So it's an excellent partnership. You know, first and foremost, I want to say I applaud what President Biden is doing with regard to global food security. And this is important because we are in a period in which climate change is decimating many parts of the world, in particular in the case of Africa, where the need then to have climate-adapting crops becomes a big issue about how you adapt to climate change. And secondly is what the U.S. government is doing with the Feed the Future initiative, which is an initiative to work with the rest of the world to be able to attain food security. And the Global Food Security Act of the U.S. government is the engine that draws that. So I'm delighted that the partnership we have with the United States government is helping us in moving forward on food security in Africa. First and foremost is the technologies for African agricultural transformation, which Mr. Secretary mentioned, but also mentioned by the Director General. This is a very novel approach that brings together the global research and development community, of which Africa Rise is a member, together with the national agricultural research centers, the private sector, making sure we can get climate-resilient agricultural technologies, not to hundreds of farmers, not to thousands of farmers, but to millions of farmers. So only millions matter. And the Technology for African Agricultural Transformation, TAT, we started it about just 5 years ago, and already it has impacted, provided climate-resilient agricultural technologies for 25 million households, and that's impacted about 250 million people. And so what we are seeing today here is part of that. The work of Africa Rise here on this is very, very important, because with climate change now, the ability now to produce climate-resilient crops that you see today is very, very important to being able to sustain food production. I am very proud of Africa Rise. I used to be chief economist of Africa Rise in 1990 to 1995, so I'm back at home, and I want to really commend all the work that you are doing. The Rise TAT program, which is what we are supporting, already has impacted on roughly 3.8 million farmers, getting all the technologies that you see all here to farmers at scale. And we've received significant support from the U.S. government for that. I'm delighted that today the U.S. government provided us an additional $9.5 million to support the TAT program to be able to impact roughly 12 million farmers in about 40 countries. So, of course, that will help significantly with this. The other part of this is a program that we are working on. Secretary Blinken mentioned the issue of the United States Department's, U.S. State Department's on vision for adapted crops and soils, VISA, which we applaud, because you need to make sure that we have the biodiversity, the crops that can adapt to climate change, and we can get those to scale. So in partnership with the U.S. government and other partners, and with Africa Rise, we are launching a program called Reward, which is a program that will now help Africa on Rice to take all these technologies to scales of more millions of farmers. That initiative will be supported from the African Development Bank in 15 countries of West Africa with $600 million US. So, DG, you're going to be very busy with all of your staff, taking all your work to states, to 15 countries, to assure self-sufficiency and beyond, as Secretary of State, expanding the potential of agriculture. And this reward program will also support roughly the cultivation of rice, which DG mentioned, on about 750,000 hectares of irrigated land. And we can imagine if we can get 7 tons per hectare and double cropping that he said, what that impact will be. And we are targeting 1 million farmers. As I said, only scale matters. We're scaling. So you can see that with support of the US government, the support of the African Development Bank, and support that we are providing to Africa Rice and other centers, that we are seeing such a huge change. Mr. Secretary mentioned the issue of infrastructure, because if you do agriculture without infrastructure, you're wasting time. And so we at the African Development Bank and our partners, we're investing $1.6 billion in the development of what's called special agro-industrial processing zones. And those zones, there are 28 of them in 11 countries that we're working on right now. And that will make sure that we have water, irrigation, power, water, roads, processing facilities, storage facilities that allow us to produce, store, and process, and then be able to export to across the region. So this is one area in which we are also going to be working with the US government. And the last one is on infrastructure corridors. Secretary Blinken mentioned the importance of corridors, and we are working with the US government on what is called the Lobito corridor. And that corridor is one that links Angola all the way to Zambia and DRC. And the African Development Bank will put in $500 million into that. The US government, we're working with the US government Department for Development Finance Corporation. We're also working with Africa Finance Corporation to make sure we can develop that whole corridor. But I also mentioned to the Secretary that we look forward to working with the US government on other corridors in Africa. And most important one for us is the Lagos-Abidjan corridor. That corridor has 75% of all the trade in the ECOWAS region, and it's a $15 billion investment. And I was delighted, the Secretary of State was very delighted about that, and we are mobilizing support for that to being able to develop that. And there'll be several other corridors that we can think about. All in all, I just want to say that when the US President said that Africa not only can feed, nor should feed itself, that Africa can feed the world, I can tell you that is the first time ever a US president has ever made that kind of statement. And so that tells you what this President Biden, the faith, the confidence, the belief that he has in Africa's potential. We can't eat potential, but that we're working with the US government and other partners to unlock and unleash that potential. So it's very inspirational, and I'm very grateful for President Biden for that. But when you also find a Secretary of State of the US government come and talk like an agriculturist like he did today, that combination is powerful in terms of global leadership, but also in terms of, let me say, food security diplomacy, which is what the Secretary Blinken literally is doing here. And when I see him talk about his vision and passion for adapted crops and soils, it's the first time I've seen the Secretary of State talk about agriculture like that. So that gives me a lot of excitement, and I want to thank him. I want to thank the embassy, the U.S. Embassy here in Abidjan, all my staff of the African Development Bank, of course, Director General Mane, and all of your staff, all your scientists, all the women, the entrepreneurs, all of you, you are the pride of Africa. And so we will be assured of our support, and we're very proud of what you're doing. And thank you for the media for being here. Thank you very much.